Welcome, this is Gamed Out Gamer. This video is intended to be a tutorial on how to use the Atari 8-bit home computers. A lot of people are getting into retro computing and they don't. This platform is a little more obscure. It was still widespread back in the early mid 1980s, but you know, it's been a long time, understandably, so a lot of people don't know how to use them. And at first, before I get into the platform, I just want to iterate that by far and wide, the best thing to do is to emulate. And you can emulate this platform very well for free. That's the key. For free, you don't have to take up any space in your house, no eBay, dealing with bad sellers or broken hardware, troubleshooting problems, buying cables, buying video upgrades. You know, it's a whole litany. Getting into actually buying hardware has many challenges, put it that way. But they are nice to own too and collect. And so let's do that. Okay, this is the first generation of the Atari 8-bit home computers. And this was the low end on the right, the Atari 400. And it has a membrane keyboard and just one cartridge. You put cartridges in there. And this is the high end, or it was roughly around $900 at release in November 1979, with a full keyboard. Many of them had mechanical keyboards. These are both very well. The build quality is very good. Many of the plungers on the 800s are going bad these days. They're starting to crack. This one does not. Some of them are fine. Many of them are not. Many of them are good. It varies. So anyway, these are the first two generation. This is the second generation. The 1200 XL was the first of the second generation. Then we had the 800 XL as well as the 600 XL, which it's in a box. And anyway, I don't have much room on the camera anyway in the view here. The 1200 XL was pan. This is the rarest of the commercially released Atari 8-bits. It's also in a way the most collectible. It's got arguably the best keyboard of all the Atari. They all have, a lot of them have great. This is an 800 XL. This is one of the mechanical keyboards. An Alps uses Alps keyboard. These are great. A lot of them do not have. A lot of them are not. You know, they have Mylar, and their typing experience is not as good on the Mylar on their stack pole keyboards for the 800 XLs. They're more or less compatible with the first generation. This one did have compatibility problems. The 1200 XL. There is an update chip, or you can do an upgrade to fix that. You can put one of the Atari 800 OS chips in this one to make it fully compatible with the original 800. And this one, sometimes you'll need a little load of compatibility thing. And so it's just a design change. These only have 2 joystick ports. The first ones have 4. The 4 joystick ports on the front. These just have 2 on the side. And these are great machines. These are the most common, arguably, and the easiest to get. And I think the 800 XL is a great starting machine. Smaller package. The 800 is just big and heavy. You have to be very careful shipping an 800. They're quite fragile and heavy aluminum block inside. I think the 800 XL is arguably maybe the best of the most commonly available, cheapest. And we have the third generation here on the left, the 130XE. There is also a 65XE, the only difference being the 65XE has 64 kilobytes of RAM and the 130XE has 128. Now, in the 65XE does not have in the United States, the 65XE does not have what is on the back. There's something called the ECI expansion thing. But in Europe, they do. The European the PAL machines for the PAL TV standard in Europe and elsewhere in the world, they will have the expansion on the 65XE. But all the US 130XEs have the expansion. And then this is sort of 3.5 this is like the 3.5. This came out a couple years later. The XEGS with an external detachable keyboard. The only Atari 8-bit with a external keyboard. and a gray theme, and they even put out a gray joystick, which is very nice to get. But the the Atari joysticks don't last forever. They're okay. They're pretty good. And this is the XEGS. It's a console. It was the best computer to console conversion of any computer in the 80s or maybe 90s as well. Very, very well done. It's just an XE. The build quality on all the XEs is probably the least. It's really built to be cheap. But they're good. If you buy an Atari 8-bit untested, it has a good chance of working. I've bought quite a few. I've only had maybe one or two with problems. Collecting them is fun, but it just takes up space, and it's not cheap, and they end up sitting in storage a lot. And really only need one or two machines. I think an XE is fine, or an XEGS is okay. You just want to be sure it works, and these are harder to work on because all the chips are soldered to the motherboard. Whereas the XLs, you're much more likely to have socketed, and all the 800s, the original 800s and 400s, are socketed, so you can replace chips if they go bad. The GTIA goes bad. It goes on, repairing and servicing. But I'd say any Atari 8-bit, the 400 is, only has 16K, and it's cool. It has a great design, but they're all good, I'd say. Each you want to collect. The 400 just has a really cool design, but it's sort of not too practical to use the keyboard as, membrane and stuff. All right, this is the XEGS. Came out in '87. This was the last, but they made the XE line up until 1992. Okay, plugging up the 800XL, all you need to do is plug in power, which I will do now. This is the power cord, and then this is the video. Video is composite. You can't composite on modern TVs. Some of them still have it, but the interpolator or the interpreter is not very good on modern TVs. They're not prioritizing good quality composite signal on modern TVs. You may see the composite RCA plug in your TV and think, oh, it'll be great, it's perfect. Maybe. Maybe not. The older sets tend to be better, actually. Here I've got a screen here from 2008, and these are much better. That's that. And then if you want to plug in a joystick, here I've got a joystick, and that goes in the right side. There's no need to do it yet. We'll wait on that. Alright, so it's all plugged up. And if you turn the Atari on, the 800XL has built-in BASIC, and you get a ready prompt. There's no disk drive plugged in. You just have what's on the computer itself. There's no storage. Back in the day, you had to buy storage, external, either a cassette tape or a floppy disk drive, or you could use a cartridge. This is a game on a cartridge, so we'll do that next. Very simple. Just turn the computer off. Now you're not really supposed to plug the cartridges in while it's on, but yeah, that's just standard practice. So I put the cartridge in, now I turn it on, and here we go. Here you get Miner 2049er. This is one of the game. So you can do that. There are many cartridges. It's one of the best home computers, not game console, but home computers for cartridge use. There's a lot. There's a whole lot of it's not like there are a huge amount of cartridges, but here's another cartridge, and you can buy. Here's Frogger. I'll just show you one more on Frogger, and there you go. That's Frogger. Very good graphics. For its day, the Atari 8-bit. A lot of colors. See how colorful it is. All right. Now next we have the Avg Cart, and this emulates cartridges. You can put, there's a SD card here, and you just put a 32 or 64 gigabyte. That would hold any, they only released about maybe 2 or 4 gigabytes of software for the computer line, because it just doesn't have much RAM. You turn it on with Avg Cart. This is Cartridge Emulator, and here you get a menu. You can select whichever cartridge. This thing can also run some some non-cartridges it can also run. But we can do here car files, and we can just say, like here's Defender. This is a great game, Defender. This is just the cartridge side of the computer. We'll get into the other aspect. You can do a disk drive and even hard drives, and it's a full-blown computer. This is not exactly a game console. It has, for its day, game console elements, but it's a full-blown computer. So there it is. We've used the cartridge. This is a multi-cart. This is probably right now the best, as far as I know, the best one, Avg Cart, and they're not too expensive. So that's Avg Cart. Now, if you want to use a disk drive, a floppy disk drive, that's very possible. We'll do that next. Back in the day, in the early or throughout the 80s, most home computer users did not have a hard drive. We used floppy disks, and this is the floppy drive here. This is the second one. Here, I'll bring out the first generation. Okay, so this was the first disk drive. Certainly the 1050s are smaller, and you can upgrade both. The 1050 is kind of a better drive. These 810s are just big. They're huge. Let's see if we can bring them up together. The 810 is big. And we can use either one. The 1050, this just does single density disks. The 1050 does single density and what's called dual or 1.5 density. And with a simple upgrade, you can do the 1050 to double density. And the 810 can do double density as well. The drive head is double density, but it doesn't have like buffering chips, or it doesn't do double density. And if you stick a double density disk in there, it won't be able to read it. It won't even think it's formatted. So there's floppy disks had single density, double density. Okay, so to use the floppy drive, this is what is called an SIO cable, and it is the direct predecessor to USB. It's very similar serial bus where you can put different types of devices. And I plugged it into the back of the computer here. It's a black cable, and it's just a little hard to see, but now we'll plug the other end of the cable into either. The floppy drive has two. You can daisy chain. So I will daisy chain. There's only one drive. We could plug up the 810 as well. You can have quite a few floppy drives on Atari, but at least 4. But you can have more. And I've got to plug in the power to the floppy drive. We will do that now. If you remember you probably don't remember, there's an Alan Alda commercial. Alan Alda from the TV show MASH did a commercial plugging up. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. It is on YouTube. The commercial where Alan Alda plugs up a Atari 8-bit. Alright, so now it's plugged up. All I did was the SIO cable between the computer and the disk drive, and the power cord is this power cord to the 1050. Let's turn the drive on. I'll just turn it up so you can see it a little better while I turn it on. There you go. It's on. That's simple. Now, you do want to turn the disk drive on before you turn the computer. Back in the day, people turned their computers off and on a lot more. So we can let's put a game in first. We'll put the disk in that way. Oh, okay. Sometimes, there we go. Discs are now very old, and they're just not working as well as they did back in the day. So sometimes it just doesn't sound right when I put a disc in. That's how you can put a disc in and remove it very easily, quickly. There you go. And it just spins it for a second, just to do it. Just to test the disc or whatever, just to read a little. It doesn't actually read anything as far as I know when it spins it, but it does detect a disc if it's in there. Alright, I've put the disk drive on top of here and I've padded it so it doesn't scuff. These are antique computers, so I try to treat them well. Now, the XL, remember I said it has built-in BASIC, and BASIC is a programming language. and that sort of sounds self-explanatory. It's a basic programming language, very easy to learn. But most games with the XL and XE, when you turn it on, you'll need to disable BASIC, otherwise the game won't work. So all you do is you hold Option down while you turn the computer on until the screen turns blue. And there we go. Okay, it doesn't like that disk. It says boot error up here in the top left, so something's not right with that disk. So we can just remove it now, and then it'll complain. Maybe I erased this disk, I'm not sure. We try the other side of it. Okay, listen. The long beeps, it makes different beeps based on the density of the disk. And this disk drive does have a double density upgrade on it. Okay, it looks like we have MIDOS on this disk. In the upper left it says MIDOS 4.1, 1985. So this is an earlier MIDOS. So this is DOS. This is not MS-DOS. Don't think MS-DOS. Atari-DOS was for the first iterations of Atari, or DOS on Atari were before the PC was ever released. So this is what you did. This was no Windows environment. It was no mouse. Later there were some mouse. You could hook up a mouse to it, but initially no, not for quite a while. So here, this is MIDOS. It's not Atari. Well, let's try Atari DOS. I thought we would get a game. This is Atari DOS. DOS 2.5 Atari. And you just pull the disk out of the sleeve, put it in the drive. Okay, that's good. Turn it off, the computer, turn it back on. And the Atari, you hear the beeps are different. They're faster. Okay, it's detected the extra RAM, so it's setting up a RAM disk. You don't have to worry about that for now. Not important. So here we are. Here's Atari DOS 2.5 1984. And this was Atari's DOS. And you can do like a disk directory. You hit A. A is disk. I don't know how well you can read it. We'll bring the camera up closer. Okay, here's the DOS. Now the screen is more colorful. This camera just doesn't. It needs saturation. The colors are a little more rich than what you're seeing. But here you had your different options. You could do a disk directory like A. Press A, enter. And here we have just DOS and dupsys. That was really all the DOS was. And then there were a couple of utilities. So Windows, how many files is Windows these days? 10,000 or 20,000? I don't know. But Atari DOS is really just 2 files. And there were a couple other utility files. Very simple by modern standards. And you could press enter at any time to refresh and go back to the... You didn't have to. You can copy files with C. So if you wanted to copy a file, which I don't want to right now, but you would... Well, we'll do that later, but you have to... It's not too complicated. If you wanted to format a disk, I could do that now. I've now put a different disk in the floppy drive, and to get the directory, press A and then enter twice. And here we have 4 files. There's a DOS on this drive as well, but we're in DOS that's compatible, should be compatible. Most are, all the Atari, I'm sure it is. This is Atari 2.5, so let's try a game here. Load, and you press L and enter, and it's Archon. So we can load Archon. And that's all you did. And it doesn't take too long. The very fast disk drive. It takes a little bit, not too long. there's Archon. It's a chess, like battling, you battle over the squares chess kind of game, Archon. I've plugged up the 810 as drive 2. Okay, so good to turn the disk drive on first before you put the disk in. People say you can wipe the disk or damage the magnetic aspect of the disk. Not physically damage it, but just magnetically the data. And that's the 810. You'll notice it's louder. Louder. I'll put DOS in. And then we can get a blank disk. I have some blank disks here. One of these is, I did do some DOS stuff. This should be a blank disk. We can get a verbatim. There's only a lot of disks modern. If you buy floppy disks these days, they can, because they're so old, the coating on the floppy disk, see if I can bring it up see the reflection. This magnetic surface here, it can actually just come right off on the disk. It'll just completely fail, and you have to clean up the head, and it makes a mess. And so it's not a good idea. You know, there are only certain brands that are better about. Some of the brands are really bad, and if you put it in, you may be able to read your data once, and then you won't be able to ever use the disk again. It varies on the brand name and how they've been stored probably as well, how humid it was and what the temperature, was it stored in climate controlled or was it stored out in the garage, etc. All right, so we have 2 disk drives. Not unheard of, but certainly more uncommon back in the day. And DOS 2.5 is in drive 1, we will see here. There's DOS 2.5, the DOS files. But if we try to do, all you do is you type D2:, enter, to do a disk drive. Now this disk is not formatted, and the 810 drive, you hear it's trying to recalibrate to make sure it's on track 0, and it bangs against the edge, like the Commodore 1541 does something similar as well. This is the 1050 does not do the banging. The 1050 is a quieter drive, and it's just going to sit here in timeout. And you can hit break. I just hit break on the keyboard, and so now the disk drive doesn't know the computer is back to the menu, and the disk drive will do this for a little while yet. There it goes. It stopped. Okay. So if we want to format it, you see up here, I format disk, and which drive to format? Disk 2. It says Y to format disk 2, and this will be single density. Since I have not upgraded this drive, I'd like to. It's going quick. Each little tap or noise is a different head. Okay, now it's started. Okay. I've never formatted with this drive. I just got it like 3 months ago. It doesn't take too long. There are 40 tracks on a disk. There it goes. And hear that? It writes some files. So now it's done. It succeeded. Now if we do a directory on disk 2, it just has 707 free sectors. There are no files on disk 2. Now we can hit enter to get now you can use H, write DOS files. This to make the disk bootable. That's all you need to do is H, and it just D2 drive 2:, press enter, press Y to write DOS files, and that will make the disk bootable. And it makes a different sound when writing versus reading, so you know it's writing. And it doesn't take too long. And it just writes two files. Very simple. Nothing too complicated. Now the Atari, you can get this computer, you can get as complicated and as deep as you want. There's a lot of depth. This is how to use the computer. Now we can Now we can look at drive 2, there it is, DOSSys and DOOPSys. And that's single density, 628. It doesn't say single density, but you know by the sector count. And you can tell a little bit maybe even by the sound it makes when you load off of the disk. Okay, so we have a blank. Now let's copy a file. Alright, so I put a different disk in drive 1. And here we remember Archon. We had Archon here, 222 sectors. So we can here C is copy file here on the menu. So just C, enter. Okay, so D, you can just type. You don't have to type if it's already on D1. You don't have to type D1, but we will. You can just type Archon D2 colon, and that will work. Or you can type D1 Archon, D1 colon Archon D2. And I think if you don't type the name, it will give it the name. It's been a long time since I copied. It should work. Let's see if this does give it the it should just give it Archon. It knows since I didn't specify. Type Y to OK, use program area. Okay. Okay, that's because it's using more RAM. That's fine. This is, you can ignore, just kind of ignore that. Okay, didn't like that. Okay, let's try again. I think you do have to type the file name. Alright, so it's reading, different pitch, right? Different sound when it's reading. And this was fancy back in the day to have 2 drives to copy. It was faster. You didn't have to swap disks so often. I'll turn the volume down. Now it's writing on drive 2. It doesn't, this program is DOS, it's pretty simplistic. It doesn't tell you, it doesn't give you any feedback how far it's gone or anything like that. No progress bar. But this is good to know how does it all work, right? And you can, it's like DOS. Remember, if you know DOS, PC DOS, you have 8 letters in a file name. You can only have 8 letters, and then if you put a dot, you can have 3 more, like .exe or .txt. You know, the Atari that actually came from previous to MS-DOS. What was it called? Gosh, there was another. Before DOS, there was another standard, and it had 6.3, 6 letters. The Atari was 8, and the PC adopted. I think they just copied the Atari system because it's 8.3 on Atari. So there it is. Now it's done copying, and we'll just do a directory of D2, and now we can load D2 Archon. So load D2 Archon. Oop, I put an E. That's my own fault. So we've successfully pirated software. Not really. This is a great, Archon's a great game. And I'm just gonna let you sit for the load to see how long and slow and all that. Not too long. Same game. And it's got I think if you hit reset, this game is reset proof, so if you hit reset on the keyboard, it just restarts the whole game and everything, as if you loaded it again. Not all games are reset proof. Now, floppy disk, this little notch on there, this means that you can write to that side, the front side of the disk, and if you tape over that notch just with a piece of tape, over both sides, then that will protect the disk. And like the back side, if you want, this is a single-sided disk drive. But this is a double-sided disc. Even a single-sided disc, most of them you can write to the back side. And you just take a hole punch, and like a hole puncher, and you can notch the right spot here, right about there, and you could write to the back side and write twice as much to the disc, and then so there's this notch system for write protecting and detecting if it's if you can write to a disc. Alright, this next will cover another DOS. This cartridge, this is a modern cartridge, and this is not really a multi-card in my opinion. It's more of a hard drive and a loader. And it has storage here. This is a CF card, 8 gigabytes, kind of upside down right now because that's how it goes into the cartridge. And by 1980s standards, 8 gigabytes, that would be a mainframe. That would be a rather large mainframe computer, millions of dollars to have 8 gigabytes hard drive storage. Typically, in the, let's say 1984, 85, a home hard drive would be 20 megabytes. Or, so much less than a gigabyte. A big hard drive in the late 80s, maybe a 40 megabyte in like 88, 89. So this is plenty of storage. One 8 gigabyte CF card. These CFs are not, they don't even make them anymore, I don't think. These CF cards. So we'll put the card into the cartridge in the top, and the side cartridge. This is just to show you. This is when you put this little switch in the top position. This is only for side 2. Top position puts it into more of a loader mode, and you put the switch down. It gives you Sparta DOS X, and I'll just show you some of the more modern DOSs for Atari. Sparta DOS X. And there it is in the computer. And I've turned the computer on with this cartridge in, side 2. And it just goes straight to Sparta DOS X with the switch in the down position. And this is a modern DOS being still updated in 2020 and beyond, hopefully, for who knows, could be a long time. This is Sparta DOS. This is more like a DOS, a little bit more like an MS-DOS, where it just gives you a prompt and you type dir to see your directory. And there's my Archon disk that we made in, and you can hear it's in, now the pitch of the tones is different. That's because Sparta DOS X, this 1050 has a speed enhancement chip. Back in the day, in 1985, you could buy, 85, you could buy a US doubler chip, and it just made the disk drive support double density, and which is 256 bytes per sector. Single density is 128 bytes per sector. So here we can load Archon. Let's see how this works. Oops, no, you just type here. You just type Archon. I think you just do that. You think you can do X Archon also as well. We'll just do type Archon. I didn't like that. Okay, so no, I'm in. Okay, I'm not sure why that didn't load. Might have to type X first. This disk drive, you can hear it start to whine, of higher pitch whine. Not the beeps, but the whine, and that's because I need to put a new felt on the opposite side of the head. It uses a little felt pad to pressure the disk against the read head, and I did buy some, so I need to install that. And so there it is. We just loaded Archon, and it's reset proof. So we have to turn the computer off. Typically, we would back in the day, just turn the computer off. So that's Sparta DOS. Okay, and we could, what else? There's no disk in drive 2. All right, we could do Fdisk. Is it Fdisk? And here's a per disk. This is for hard drives. Press escape for menu. And here we can open, enumerate. So here's my we're just looking here in the devices, the disk device or devices for the side 2, and it sees the SanDisk 8 GB thing. I'll do that. I did it a little quick. I apologize. Here's the main menu. You just press escape. This is Sparta-DOS X, and then open. And then here it shows you. So we'll just hit enter for, it should be enter for open. And it doesn't see anything on the drive. I'm a little surprised. So here's a partitioning. You can make hard drive partitions in here and set it all up to 512 bytes, which is per sector. 512, yeah, bytes per sector for a hard drive. 32 megabyte limit per hard drive letter. And so this, you can have up to 15 hard drives, 32 megs each. And typically you would start at drive 3. I don't know why this SD card is blank. I get this one might be blank. I thought I initialized it. Okay, I found another CF card, and you can see here when you turn on the computer with the side 2 cartridge. You don't have to know this. This is just kind of gives you a hint of how deep this computer can get. It's not just a game console with a keyboard. It really is like the Odyssey 2 was, in the early 80s. It was Odyssey 2 was really a game console with a keyboard. So here we have the side cartridge, and then here it has found a C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K drives. So here we've got a D3. You turn the computer on. So here we are, D3. I forget what's on here. Just a very simple. But then we go to we can also, let's see, D. You can also use drive letters. So C would be, so D colon would be drive 4. And nothing on that with D, E, F. I know there's some stuff on here. There's G. Each one of these drives is 32. H. I just did find some stuff. Okay, I guess that's it. C drive. So if we go, oh, I know what I was going to show you. If we go to Fdisk, and you just press enter, and enumerating devices, it finds the one. You can have more than one CF card on an Atari 8-bit too. But here are all the drives configured. You don't have to know this level of depth. 512 bytes per sector, which is like quad density. And here the this D3 is the B is bootable, and A means active, and here in the attributes for the ones, and this is the drive, the position, the start position, and this you see here one that says EXT. That's a FAT32 drive, and you can put this in your computer and copy, and if it's a FAT32 partition, it's only accessible from the loader. Well, we'll do that in a moment, but we'll escape out of this drive partition, and I'll just show you. If you type car at the prompt, that gives you your. This is all on the cartridge. This is not in a drive. This car device is all the DOS, Sparta-DOS X. So when it's like your path. If you know what a DOS path is, when you type in commands, it'll look through here. So here's a Sparta-DOS X. I can pause the scroll by pressing Control 1 and let it. You can see all these DOS commands you have here for Sparta-DOS X. This computer has a clock, a real-time clock. I upgraded this computer with a megabyte of RAM and a real-time clock. And so here this computer knows the date. Typically, an Atari 8-bit would not know the date, but here it knows it's, well, is that the right? Yeah, this is the 7th of April, 2020 is the date, and you can change the date. But by default, the Ataris did not have a real-time clock. Very few 8-bit computers had real-time. The PCs did, but the PCs were later, and the PCs cost, 2, 3, 4 times as much as an Atari. These were cheaper computers. Compared to a PC, the CPU on this computer is simpler, I would say. The first PCs even had, the first PCs could access more RAM. They had more functioning slots, and so the PCs, they were more expensive, but the PCs could not do graphics and sound well at all. They did very bad graphics and sound. So there's our, all of our DOS here, and there's a Sparta-DOS X flash. There's a atari8.co.uk website, Flash Jazz, and he updates this Sparta-DOS X and fixes stuff, and there's all kinds of stuff here. Atari, you know, this Sparta-DOS X. Now, if you don't want to use a floppy drive, you don't have to with the Atari 8-bit. You can use this. This has the SIO plug on the one side for the Atari, and then on this side is a USB connector. So you can plug this into your PC. The SIO bus is very similar to USB, and probably the only computer of the 80s where you can do something so simply and easily is, and then what you can do, you can have 0 disk drives on your Atari 8-bit, and you can set up as many drives as you want, up to 15 on the PC, and set up virtual disk drives. I'll show you how that works. We'll plug it in now. I've got to unplug the disk drives, I guess. Turn the drives off, and then I need to pull the cable out, the SIO cable. These can get stiff. Okay, that's fine. Okay, it's now into the back of the computer here. There it is. And then I just plug in somewhere here. Somewhere here I have the other end of the cable. Alright, I've plugged in to the cable into the computer, and it just gives a green light when it has USB power. That's from the PC, Windows 10. And we'll set up some virtual disk drives. Alright, so this is on the Windows PC, Windows 10, and here this is called Respect, RESPEQT, and there's another one called Aspect. I prefer Respect because with this adapter that I just showed you, you have this setting here, and you can set the error response. I don't think you can do this in Aspect. And sometimes there's problems where with this adapter it'll pause, and I don't know why it does that. You'll be loading anything, and it'll just sit there and pause and time out. And so I have to set this 300 US, or you can try a different number, but that seems to work. This error response. So that's why I use Respect to set that. Anyway, so this you see here on the left, you can just set one. It looks more complicated than it really is. Here you can set printers, printer 2. I've never done that part of it. But here's disk drive 1, and here you can mount a folder, like a Windows folder, or you can mount a disk image. So if you click disk image, let's say I want to load like Alley Cat. There's different versions of Alley Cat here. It's a game. You doesn't have to be a game, but here and so now I've set Alley Cat. I can make the window maybe a little bigger, so it'll fit on your screen. And so here we have Alley Cat as set as drive 1. It's that simple. That's just like putting a disk in a floppy drive. It's that simple. And I could even boot the computer off of it now. Let's see. Hold Option down, and you'll see it's low. You'll hear it. You won't see it, but you can see at the bottom. It's giving a report here on the bottom of the window, the sector. It's scrolling through. I'll let it finish loading. So, and that's the computer, the game music. Alley Cat. There it is. Love them mousies. Cool game. And you're like a cat. And you have to go through the windows, and there's laundry, and eventually a dog here, because I don't have the joystick plugged in right now. A dog will come attack me, and so that's definitely the better way to go. And many games many games mostly require you can't use it as a hard drive. For some games, they require it to be accessed as a floppy drive. And the dog got me there. So you can jump up. Oop. And here you can jump. So that's Alley Cat, right? And there's different screens. This isn't the only screen. You get the cheese. You have to get the mice and the cheese on the wall. There, I got two. I got two mice. And the broom is trying to get you. And but you can do all this emulating. You don't have to buy. There, I finished that room. So I get a pretty high score on that room, and then you go back. Then you're back to the main area, and you try to get. Here's the romance. See the. So you have to get to the top. It's difficult because the blue cats bounce you off, and you can only step on the solid hearts. It's difficult. It's doable though. It can be done. Great game. Great game. Now this is the Atari cassette drive, and back in the 80s, early 80s, floppy drives were very expensive, very prohibitively expensive. Considering inflation, you have to factor in inflation. So many people would use a cassette drive, and you can load from the Atari with that. Let's see, where does he eject? I was cleaning this, and so careful when you clean these. On this one, let's play. Here's stop eject. You put the tape in here. This does not work. The belt, the drive belt, does not work. It's broke. If you buy one of these on eBay, the drive belt probably needs a replacement. But there's all kinds of cartridges, and you can copy and save. You just type in the basic prompt, where you turn the computer on holding select, and it makes a different sound. Or you type C-load in basic, and it will load. So this is here a basic cartridge on writing programs by Atari. That's an Atari cartridge. And here's this. That's the second. There's the two cartridge set. I've got several here. I don't have a whole lot. We didn't use. We used one back in the day a little bit, and then we got a disk drive, and we never looked back. The Commodore 64 tape drive system is better, I think. Faster. The Atari one is very slow, but it does have a separate audio track, and you can do some like learning. There's like the learning French programs that I think that the Atari can do better, because it can play off the audio track while it's loading data or something like that. I don't know. I'm not too familiar with the cassette drives, but it also plugs into the SIO, also into the SIO bus on the back of the Atari. You can do modems and printers and tape drives and floppy drives, and there's some other devices as well that you can plug into. It really is like a USB. It was really advanced for its day. Okay, it's start. If you turn the computer on holding, just listen for the tone. I can't do the tape, but that sound, that brings back memories too, that sound. You just turn it on. Now it's waiting for you to press play on the tape, cassette tape. And it's very slow. It's not extremely slow, but it's slow. There it is. As far as powering the computer, here is an Atari, one of them. There are several variants just for North America, and there are other ones that I don't have for other markets, the European and different voltages, UK and mainland Europe, but this is one of the there are 5 variants at least for America, and not all of them are recommended. Now this one is one of the good ones. This is the most collectible as far as function, because it can be serviced. You can open it up and change all the parts out. It's fully serviceable. But I have not used it yet. I need to voltage test it, and these, it probably needs a service. And you know what I use instead? I use this. This is a phone charger. This is just a USB phone charger, modern, 5 volts DC is all the computer needs, the XLs and the XEs. Now, the Atari 800 and 400, they use the 9 volts AC adapter, and those are better. Those are nowhere near, those are just a transformer. There's no electronics. It's just 2 coils separated by a distance. I don't know how transformers work exactly, but it's it just downgrade steps the voltage. Those are more reliable. They can be a little bit voltage out of spec sometimes. Sometimes the fuse is blown and they need to be opened up, and they're difficult to open up and change the fuse and the. In fact, I have a couple. Here, but I can't. It's down. Hold on. And this is the power supply for the 800 and 400, but also for the 1050 and 810 disk drives. And it's just a transformer. There's no capacitors or anything like that in there. Much less likely to fail. Some people say that the voltage does drift over the years, so test the voltage. I think without load. This one tests at 14 volts AC without load on it, but with load it goes down to 9. So back, just to reiterate, to stress that these power supplies, they're old, the capacitors in there can and do fail. Not as bad as like the late, like the 90s and early 2000s. It was much worse. Like Atari 800s, all the capacitors, even though capacitors can go bad, they didn't fail. They built them to better specifications or whatever they did. The 800s. I did a capacitor swap in one of my 800s, and I noticed zero difference. I put modern ones in there, but it doesn't hurt. These are old things. These are old computers, and these power supplies can, even this one, it could be putting out the wrong voltage, and it would destroy. It could potentially ruin the computer permanent. But even if that does happen, you can save the keyboard and the case, and it's not like. If you ruin, like if you were to put this, hypothetically, it could fry the RAM on the motherboard, and that can be replaced, or it could ruin the CPU and the RAM. What it takes out is sort of random, and how out of spec it is. But and I've seen, just because you buy a new one, like there's an eBay seller selling new old stock power supplies for the XLs and the XEs, and that's not a good gauge. If it's never been used, it could actually be worse, because the capacitors like regular use, and I bought one like that, and it went bad pretty quick, and it did some mild damage to my computer. So careful with power supplies, and that's the whole thing. That's why I recommend emulating. Emulating is just so much better for most people, and so The biggest threat to Atari 8-bits is just people throwing them away. They're going into the landfills, and now there's just no reason to throw one into the garbage, even if it doesn't work. Save it. I have a couple that don't work, and I don't throw them away because I've got the case and the keyboard and the keycaps, and there's the motherboard. The circuit board itself is probably fine, and there's no reason to throw any of this stuff away anymore. This joystick, they don't make that. This little USB phone charger, these are a dime a dozen. I wouldn't have any second thought about throwing that away. It's not antique or anything. All right, on to the next. If I can think of anything else, we'll continue. This is inside the 800XL that we were just using, and I have two upgrades in this machine. One is this is a video upgrade to make the video clearer. You see how clear the text was. Even now, most 800XLs only do composite, but it's a simple upgrade to do S-video, which is chroma luma. It separates the luminance from the color signal when you do chroma luma separate, or just otherwise called S-video. For the regular 800 XL, it's a simple. I think you just run one wire, and then you can support chroma luma, and that's pretty easy. You need to solder. It's not that difficult. It's very easy. So I have this video. This is called the UAV video upgrade, and that just upgrades the video, the composite and S-video to modern standard. There's no such thing as modern standards for it, but it just updates it as about as good as you'll ever get. For the UAV. And the other upgrade I've put in this computer, this is the RAM 1 megabyte. I didn't mount it properly, really. It just sits in there. But this has the 1 megabyte of RAM. It has Sparta-DOS X, and it has the real-time clock. So this is called the Ultimate 1 megabyte upgrade, and there's the main. This is the main. This has this smaller one is the, I believe, where the flash, you can flash new version of software for Sparta-DOS X and the menu system and stuff. So that's where Sparta-DOS X is on this. So I didn't need the cartridge to do that, but I did need the cartridge because this does not have a hard drive. The Ultimate 1 megabyte does not support the CF card like this. And these two work together. They're sold by the same person. And then here's the RAM here. These two chips here are the RAM. And it plugs into the MMU slot on one side and then into the operating system? Yeah, operating system here, and then a couple pins go to the CPU over here. And that's what I've done with that. And then I did put some heat sinks on. It's not necessary. This is not a Commodore 64. These do not really you don't have major heat problems. The GTIA, this is the GTIA chip, and this updates the screen. This gets the hottest. And I just put them on there, why not? And here's the CPU. This gets rather warm. It's not crazy hot. You can, and then here's the Antic that doesn't get very hot, just a tiny bit. And this is the sound chip, and this is the PIA or parallel. It's just works through the joystick ports and does some other stuff. A lot of it's kind of complicated what each chip, the custom chips, you kind of share roles. It's not clear cut. The CPU is there's only one CPU, but the Antic chip is just as capable as the CPU, and it does run its own code. There's I believe called a display list, and so the Antic is just as complicated as the CPU, and then the GTIA it does it's kind of what it does the graphics modes and does other stuff. It can even do sound. It also accepts the keyboard input for the function keys, the start, select, option, and reset. Reset may go to CPU as well, but this is kind of confusing. Frankly, this is sound. This just does sound. The GTI can do sound too, but this is the sound pokey chip. This is what does the music, but it also does the disk drive input. The loading of the beeps you hear when you're doing disk drive, it also does disk I/O, and it also does the paddles on the paddles when you're using a game with paddles. Then it'll work those. So it's a pretty simple layout. This was the optimized. The 1200 XL came just before this, and then they optimized it tremendously. I think they did a fantastic job with the 800 XL motherboard. It's certainly cost reduced. That's okay. All right. There it is. The internals. If you do want to use a USB charger to power your computer, then you'll need this adapter, or you can make one yourself. If you have a power cord, you just need a 7-pin DIN connector, and you can solder it. You need to set it to the right pins, otherwise you'll destroy the computer or something. But you can make one yourself. I actually made one myself. This one's a little short, but I think that's by design, because if it's too long, you get voltage drop, apparently. Brewing Academy, that's the website, thebrewingacademy.com. And this is an interesting project. This is a custom Atari 8-bit that it's a modern creation here. An Atari 8-bit working out of a 1050 disk drive case. Very, very cool. Has MIDI ports and PS2 keyboard ports and 2 CF slots here, and 2 joystick, and the whole Atari 8-bit. You have to, of course, remove all the 1050 internals from a disk drive. But 1050 drives are pretty easy to find. You can get one for $50 or $100. A non-working you can get for $25. So this is a very cool project, community project. It's showing what's happening with the platform in the modern day. And there's other stuff going on too. There are other projects. And just to note that it is using the Atari custom chips, but all the other boards, everything else in the computer is modern. But you still need, it's not emulating. This is not an emulation device. It's an Atari 8-bit, but because it uses the custom chips. And if you want to buy one, it's like $700-800 fully made with all the stuff, because there's a couple different boards that are optional, like the CF cards are optional, and MIDI is optional, and stuff like that. And here is I did order just the bare board for it's called the 1088 XLD. You can see here in the lower left, 1088 XLD. Very cool. This is just the board. It needs all the custom chips here. Here's GTIA, Antic, Pokey right and left. So it supports stereo sound as well. You can put 2 Pokeys, optional. You don't have to. But you do require one of the Ultimate 1 megabytes, and that alone costs like $90, shipping and everything, and PIA. The CPU goes here. Cartridge, here's your cartridge, and here's the ECI. Remember the 130XE on the back? We showed the ECI, so they pop out of the top of it, not out of the back on the board. And then here on the back we have the 2 SIO ports. 2 is interesting, huh? Because the computer, all the Atari 8-bit computers only had 1. But the 1050 case has 2 out the back, so I guess you might as well put 2. They had a sale on these, and I can't afford to it's like $350 in parts, I think. So. And this is another upgrade, just to show you guys that can be done with the Atari 800. Only the Atari 800. This makes it like the Ultimate 1 megabyte for the 800XL that I showed you in the other computer. But this, in addition, it has a CF card. So, and this is a rather it's an involved. The install is nowhere near as easy. I would say it's like a 7 or 8 out of 10, just because it takes about 2 hours at least. And there is modification to the computer that I don't like. I didn't realize when I ordered it how much it was.